I'm not a great manager. Okay. Can I do it? Yeah. It requires more energy, but there are people that I see every week that are so much better managers than I am. And your people deserve great managers. If you're going to put somebody in a role that's going to have a team, man, make sure that person is a great manager. Make sure that they're wired for that and they are on fire for it, because your people are going to get so much more from it. And that's how you're going to keep them. That's how they're going to want to be there. That's how they're going to be their best.
Welcome to the Pivotal Leader Podcast with Gina Trimarco, featuring lively interviews with CEOs, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who share their stories and best practices for shifting business from problems to profits. Sit back and get ready to pivot.
Hey everyone, this is Gina Trimarco, Chief Results Officer of Pivot 10 Results, a strategy and training company that helps businesses shift from people problems to performance results. Each week on The Pivotal Leader, I feature inspirational leaders who know how to positively impact their customers, employees, and brand through culture building. On this episode of The Pivotal Leader, I interviewed Mark C. Winters, #1 Amazon bestselling author, keynote speaker, CEO, and Certified EOS Implementer. He co-authored the book Rocket Fuel with Gino Wickman, author of Traction and founder of EOS Worldwide. Mark's passion is helping entrepreneurs get unstuck so they can pursue their freedom. Depending on the unique situation, Mark's talent for introducing just the right combination of perspective and process sparks teams to move faster or begin moving in the proper direction with clarity. As a teacher, coach, and facilitator, Mark spends most of the time directly engaged with entrepreneurial leadership teams as a certified EOS implementer, helping them implement EOS in their own companies. He's delivered over 500 full-day EOS workshops with companies from around the U.S. Mark has been an entrepreneur since the age of 28 after catching the bug during B School at the University of Chicago. At last count, he started, bought, sold, shut down 11 different companies. One recent venture as a founder and CEO had a very successful exit yielding a 100-time cash return in less than 3 years. All this activity has led to some recognition, including being named a Tech Titan finalist as an emerging company CEO and listed as 40 under 40 by the Business Journal in both Milwaukee and Dallas. Mark has also been awarded Rookie of the Year and Chair Excellence distinctions by Vistage International. As always, this podcast teaches me personally so much. Prior to 2017, I had no idea what EOS was, and now I'm a believer. If you're an entrepreneur, a company founder, or CEO, this episode will enlighten you if you're new to EOS or just a great refresher from Mark. So let's get started. Hey, Mark, thanks for joining me today on The Pivotal Leader.
Gina, thanks for having me.
Appears we have a lot of mutual friends in Dallas.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, pretty exciting. So I'm going to have to make another trip, which I will do very soon. So hopefully we'll get to meet in person. I'm thinking of throwing a party, and maybe it's like the Keith Walters party because he's introduced all of us.
That sounds like a perfect plan.
I'm sure he'll love that. So let's jump into the basics. Prior to the recording, we were talking a little bit about the book and about EOS, and how I would like to approach this podcast today is to jump in, like this is new to everybody. Like I said, I've read both Traction. I don't know if I mentioned that to you, but I've read Traction and Rocket Fuel. I've listened to it at 1.3. versus 2.0. I'm going to try that soon. And I've recently started implementing the EOS within my own company, which has been awesome. So for those unfamiliar with EOS, and then we'll get more into Visionary and Integrator, could you give kind of a general overview of EOS and then touch on the Visionary Integrator relationship?
You bet. So EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And so the way to think about it fundamentally is an operating system for your business. So from the perspective of the entrepreneur or the visionary, imagine a world where you are crystal clear on where the organization's trying to go, the vision for the organization, and how it's going to get there. And you have everybody in the organization that is 100% on the same page about what that looks like. So we call that vision. Second thing is traction. So every day, the real world that you lead the team off into begins to look more and more like the picture you have of that vision. So you have the sense of, hey, we're making progress, which gives you more energy, gives you more confidence to take on the things that you need to take on. And then finally, healthy being about the team itself. So when you're sitting there working with the leadership team, you're looking into the eyes of the folks that are on the team with you, you have a sense of, hey, we really do have the folks here to do the stuff that we need to get done. There's nothing we can't talk about. It's all just stuff. We're not afraid to bring things up. We just bring them up, put them on the table, and talk them through and figure out how to use them to get closer to that picture we have of that vision. So those three things, vision, traction, and healthy, are the output, the result of implementing that EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. So as an entrepreneur or a visionary sitting there thinking, man, that sounds like something I would really like to have, then EOS is definitely an option you should look at to help you make that real.
Let's talk a little bit about the visionary and the integrator. And could you define each one of those?
Sure. So a visionary and integrator are two essential roles, leadership roles at the top of a high-performing entrepreneurial organization. And, Gino Wickman and I partnered on the book Rocket Fuel to really kind of capture and lay out a definition of what those are and a structure for how you manage and maximize that relationship. So fundamentally, the visionary, everybody knows already. The visionary is sort of that classical founding entrepreneur. They are crazy people, right? They see lots of opportunities out there, always coming up with new ideas, always playing in the future and on the really the fringe of reality in a lot of ways. And so they're extremely valuable in that regard. They can do things that other people just can't conceive of, just can't, get their heads around. And so when we can couple them with this counterpart, the integrator is wired really differently. They're much more about making things real, making things happen. So imagine that the visionary makes it up and the integrator makes it real, right? So they're very execution focused. They're very highly oriented for follow through and chasing details and leading teams and pulling together all the parts. So they really kind of work, through and between the rest of the leadership team harmoniously to get everybody pointing in the same direction and moving to the same tempo to make all that stuff happen.
So I know you talked about this in your book, but I want to bring this up for the entrepreneur out there who says, I'm both a visionary and an integrator, which is how I initially felt at the beginning of your book,
right? But
not the way I felt by the end of the book. So can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So what we've found in practice, and our friend Jason Williford would tell us statistically that it's a very rare situation when somebody truly is gifted in both areas as a visionary and as an integrator. So, we say the ratio there is actually about 4-1. So of all the people that can be a visionary, we've got 4 of those for every one person who is naturally wired to be an integrator. And of that whole population, we'd say in about 5% of the time, somebody is truly, wired to be effective being both. And, Gina, here's the way it usually plays out. Like you feel initially, well, I can do all this stuff. Which is true a lot of times just because of necessity, right? So from your path, your experience, you've had to learn how to be really effective at a lot of different things just to make stuff happen. And so you've done it and you're serviceable, and some things you may be actually pretty good at. But if I was to hold a gun to your head and go, okay, you got to choose, which one do you want? Most people will go, well, this is the one I really enjoy. This is the one I'm really, I'm energized by. And that's the tell, right? That's the one that tips it towards, okay, this is the one that you're naturally meant to be.
So for the visionary, at what point should he or she be putting an integrator in place, and how do they get started? How do they figure out how to get that going?
So let me back that up just a step, just so people can kind of get their heads around the whole process of what's happening there. So we sort of think about the visionary integrator relationship in 3 major phases that we call crystallize, connect, and maximize. So crystallize, that first phase is kind of doing what we just did, is getting your head around what these 2 roles are and which one am I, and what type of one of those am I, right? So all visionaries don't look alike. All integrators don't look alike. They have sort of these same themes, but we talk about it as a 2-piece puzzle where you've really got to understand what the shape of your particular edge looks like, so that we can match it up with that shape of an integrator that's going to be complementary for you. So the first part, that crystallized part, is about introspection. It's about understanding believing that this is a structure that can help you, and then really understanding yourself. So then you go into the next phase, which is where that question fits. Okay, now I want to connect with one. And it's hilarious to watch when a visionary first gets exposed to this concept. I mean, almost without fail, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, great, where do I find one? How do I get one? This sounds awesome, right? And so in the book, we lay out a process. We actually lay out a 7-step process, to the connection process to make this happen. And without walking you through every step, it's essentially a series of things that help you look at yourself and understand yourself and what's important to you, where you are now, and relative to what's important for where you want to be. Right. So that kind of tells you the things to look for. And then you go into this search mode. And, there's a couple of different pathways you can follow on the search mode. One, very simple one where we see a lot of people have a lot of effectiveness is just kind of putting the signal out to their circle of connections. Right. So, most of visionaries are pretty well connected folks. And so they just kind of make the world aware that, hey, I'm looking for this thing called an integrator. Here's what it looks like. Specifically, here's what I want mine to look like. And they start getting folks that say, hey, I know somebody like that. I know somebody who actually is just like that, and you need to talk to them. And it leads a lot of people to who ultimately becomes their match. Another thing that has sort of developed since we came out with the book is a lot of recruiting firms are beginning to focus their practice specifically on finding integrators. So if you want some more help, you want somebody who's a professional at this. They're good at sourcing candidates. They're good at vetting and kind of cutting through a lot of the noise that can be out there, and a lot of the legwork that you got when you have to look at a lot of people like this. There are some great recruiting firms that have really become experts at this. So they can help you get there faster. They can help you find people that you may not be able to see just within your circle of connections. Does that make sense?
It does. And I noticed that on your website, because I was going through your website and I noticed that you have that's a resource on your site of recruiting firms that focus on integrators.
Great. Appreciate you saying that. Yeah. If people want, we have several different resources on the site there. And if folks can come and look at that, there's different professional outfit services, resources, whatever, that can just help you get there a little bit faster.
Yeah, I really like that because I'm like, wow, what a great niche. That's something I really thought about. There's a niche, recruiting for integrators.
Yeah. And the other way to think about that, Gina, is since that ratio is 4-to-1, right? That means I've got one integrator for every 4 visionaries, and that one integrator wouldn't be a perfect fit for all 4 of those visionaries because of that 2-piece puzzle thing. So if you're a visionary and you're thinking, yeah, I want to get one of these integrators, you need to get moving. You need to get out there and start looking, because there just aren't enough of them.
Well, we mentioned our mutual friend Jason, and when he did my assessment, which is on a previous podcast, he said it would be very hard for a CFO or CEO to please me and my expectations. So I don't know. I think it'll be tough for me to find the most perfect integrator, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah, and so that's where the structure really comes in. So it's not natural, and frankly, it's a mistake that a lot of visionaries make. Is they go out and their first instinct is to hire somebody that looks like them. Well, that's not going to help you, right? If you get more you, no. I didn't do anything, right? No. I probably created a bigger problem.
No.
So I've got to find this person that looks different than me and is a little bit counterintuitive. That why would I want somebody around like that? But that's what sets up a natural friction. But through the structure, we put a framework around that lets you really blend that friction into power.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what propels the organization to the next level.
Yeah, the last thing we need is another me in our company. That one is enough. So let's talk a little bit about maybe that smaller company that kind of gets this concept right, and they're trying to get past that one plateau that many small businesses get to, and they can't seem to grow beyond it because they need that integrator to help them. And some of us visionaries are like, I've been spinning on my mind. I'm like, I need another salesperson. We need to generate more revenue. So how do you get them to that mindset of, we have to make that kind of investment financially to bring on that type of person? How do you get them there?
Yeah, great question. And actually, there's a few questions embedded in that. The first one is I would kind of back up. Let me clarify that rocket fuel is written for organizations that are somewhere between 10 to 250 people. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean that it's not applicable to companies smaller than that or larger than that, but that's really the sweet spot of where we've got most of the right. case studies where we've seen it work. We know it works there, right? So your question goes to, two kind of things. One is, who's the next most impactful role for me to hire? And the answer isn't always integrator. Okay. So sometimes it is, you need to know that role's there, and you need to know if somebody else isn't doing it, you're probably doing it. And right. if you aren't aware you're doing it, you're probably doing a crappy job of it. Right.
Yes.
So that awareness is important. So it's at least in your selection set of things to consider. But that said, hey, a salesperson might be the next most important hire. A financial person maybe, right? So you've got to be open to that. And every situation is a little bit different. But then once you get past that and you start getting to the point where you really think, maybe that integrator thing is next, but boy, it's going to cost me money. It's going to be expensive. That expense side of it is so easy to see because it's right in front of you.
Right.
What's not easy to see are all the benefits, right? All the impacts that they'll have. And so, one of the approaches that we'll use to help people kind of get their head around that is to take the issues list. And so, you're working on implementing EOS, you're familiar with that, but basically, the list of all the things that are on your radar of stuff you've got to fix, stuff you've got to solve, opportunities you want to figure out how to take advantage of, just all that stuff that's not where you want it yet. And if you go down that list and you look at, this would either be solved or significantly advanced if I had an integrator here. Just identify those and then kind of go back and go, if that was solved or advanced, what would the financial impact be of that? And so you put a dollar figure on it, the absolute number doesn't matter as much as just some level of magnitude. But then right. you write all that down and you go down to the bottom and you add all that up, and all of a sudden that typically becomes a pretty compelling argument for an ROI on bringing in the integrator, mm-hmm. right? And so that makes it real, helps you get your head around it, and it addresses one of the readiness factors we talk about. We talk about 4 readiness factors in sort of that self-assessment phase, and it's financial readiness. You've got to be financially ready to, see an ROI there and make the financial commitment that you're going to need to make that integrator move.
And that was a perfect segue, because my next question was about the benefits of this. And does this, when you set up this system, does this speed up the success for a business? So for that business that is trying to get to the next level, how would this, it's hard for us to see it from when, when the business is maybe running us. So how does that impact revenue growth or recruiting and retention or culture? And it's a lot of questions in one. Maybe we could go one by one.
Yeah. So the answer I'm going to give you is, there's no one answer, right? So different companies are going to respond differently at different paces, and different things are going to be impacted first, just based on the needs and the specific situation the business is in, and the particular combination of visionary and integrator that ends up coming together. The thing that is important for people to think about here, Gina, one of the things is, don't expect that you're going to bring an integrator in and all of a sudden it's like you magically snap your fingers and it's all fixed and hunky-dory, the next day. That's not what to expect. We talk in the book about the concept of patience, and you have to allow time for, the relationship to kind of come together, to build that trust between the two of you. And it's really it's almost like a spousal relationship. It's a really heavy relationship where it's really close. There's really a lot of time and energy invested between the vision and the integrator to lay that foundation. When you do that at the beginning, and then the returns start to come, and then the lever that you've got is that much longer. So it's not like you go, you get to the same step a little bit faster. It's like, no, you get to a much higher step than you would have been able to get to before. Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. And I think in the book you mentioned, I remember hearing one story about it taking a year. I forget who it was that was really struggling with it, but it was at the 1 year mark when it really started to click.
Yep. And everybody has their own pace, but, we think a year is a good rule of thumb, to kind of think, okay, by about a year, it should be functioning, in the neighborhood of what I would expect it to function like. And you certainly should have a sense then of, if this is going to be a good, healthy combination or not. But if you get too anxious, too early, you're going to miss something, and you're not going to do the work to lay the foundation you need to. I actually interviewed a visionary and integrator duo probably 6 months to a year ago. And I mean, they had a story where it was a very detailed schedule for how they were going to roll out and transition responsibilities to the integrator. A lot of people will bring integrators in, and for some period of time, they will have them observe that. So they're not deciding, they're not, weighing in. They're actually just sitting there kind of watching, learning. And that's hard, right? I mean, because you're paying them, right? So it's really hard, but it's all in the spirit of training and preparation. So that when you do, hand the reins over, if you will, hand the responsibility over for the things that the integrator is going to be responsible for, they're prepared and they're ready to jump in and be effective. And that's when they start to go fast.
Can you talk a little bit about determining if you're really an integrator or visionary? There's a way that people can actually go through the book and figure that out for themselves.
Yeah, so there are assessments, and they're in the book. They're also online, so you can go online, and there are currently 2 assessments: the visionary assessment and the integrator assessment. And I encourage people to take both. Some people think, oh, I'm a visionary, so I'm just going to take that one. Well, I'd like you to have a perspective on what your integrator score is as well. And the same way for people who think they're just an integrator. It's really helpful. And then when we start to compare the two of you, so Gina, let's say you're looking for your integrator candidate. You take your visionary and integrator assessments, they take theirs. And what we want to be able to do is literally lay those things side by side on the table and compare. And what we're looking for, a couple things. Now, number one, are they in the zone of where we'd want them to be as your integrator? I'm going to guess that you probably scored pretty high on the visionary index. Did you take it yet or not?
I haven't. I was in the car. I listened to it and I just answered it verbally out loud to myself.
Yeah. So give it 2 minutes. I know you can hang in there for 2 minutes, right? Give it 2 minutes. It's 20 questions. And, 20 questions each. So 40 questions altogether, but go through and take that. And then, so you'd have yours. I'm going to guess that you're pretty high on the visionary side. And we talk about a rule of thumb there of 80 or higher. It's not a pass fail, right? It's all just sort of degrees. But if you're in a business that has a high, it lives very high on the visionary spectrum. So, some businesses need a lot of visionary. You're in a creative business, and so we're going to need more vision than somebody that's just in a business that maybe hangs drywall. Okay, so there's different degrees of vision that are required. So in a company that needs a lot of vision, we'd want that visionary to score really high on the visionary side. And if somebody scores really high on the visionary side, they need somebody who scores really high on the integrator side to kind of match their power. Yeah. Match their match just how strong they are on that side. But if somebody is lower than 80, say they're 70, 60, somewhere in that, it doesn't mean they can't do it. Just recognize what the fit is for your particular company, and that it may take them more energy to deliver at the level somebody who scored higher would be able to do it. Does that make sense? Okay.
No, it makes total sense.
So we want you to be able to look at those two side by side with your prospective integrator. And we're looking for a couple of things there, assuming they're high on the scale. The first one is, do you have big gaps? So between the two of you, are there questions on the assessments where you both scored low? That would not be great, right? So we want between the two of you to have all the areas covered with at least one of you that scored, pretty high. That means between the two of you in that duo, we've got coverage for all the important stuff. So we're looking for gaps. And the second thing we're looking for is overlap. So it's okay that you maybe both scored high on certain things, but you want to be aware of that, and you want to think about who's really going to own that in the relationship, who's going to be the driver of it, and who's going to be the helper, right? The one who's going to maybe contribute or be the sounding board. But you need to be clear. Those where you have a lot of overlap is an area where you just need to be tuned in so that you can communicate effectively. Otherwise, you might get yourself tripped up. So there's all those kinds of things we can tell by taking the assessments.
Well, speaking of responsibilities, and I know there's different responsibilities for both, but since this show is about company culture, who becomes, I know what your answer is going to be, but I sort of want everyone to hear it. Who becomes responsible for company culture? Is it the visionary, the integrator, or both? Because as you know, companies, the culture is often based on that founder, which is often the visionary. So what do you do with all of that to keep a healthy culture?
You bet. So there's no single answer. So what we find is typically one of them, the visionary or the integrator, has a stronger passion for culture. A lot of times it's the visionary, but not always. Sometimes there's a visionary who's kind of like, you know what? Yeah, I'm into it. Yeah, I believe in it, but you know what? That's not my passion, and the integrator really is on fire for it. So it's okay. Just whichever one feels has a more strong feeling for it is fine for it to live there. It doesn't mean that the other one doesn't play. They still play. They're still very involved. They still have to be modeling it. As they're going as leaders, that's how the company's going to go. So they got to be, setting the example in terms of culture.
Very good. I want to segue a little bit. And one of the things that jumped out at me, again, I'm a book listener versus a reader, and you had talked about productivity versus creativity. And then I stumbled on that again on the website. So I want to talk a little bit about that, because being a very creative person, I sometimes struggle between creativity and productivity.
Right.
And then you talk a little bit about attention residue and intensity formula. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you're pulling all kinds of stuff in there. So that's actually not from the book. That's from the video blog.
That's it.
You're probably getting that from.
But somewhere I picked up on creativity.
So creativity versus productivity. There's actually a formula there that I did a video on that pulls on work from Adam Grant and Cal Newport. So I'm pulling in a couple other guys' work there.
Yes.
I think it actually started with Cal. Adam made some observations on it, and then I kind of built on that and applied it to the visionary integrator structure. But if you think about it at a high level, and if people will go to the video blog, they can see the video where I go into it in more detail. You can see the formulas there. So I won't recreate all that. But the visionary is about spending their time on creativity, right? They're our idea engine. They're seeing the future. They're figuring out how can we position ourselves based on where things are headed in the best place to take advantage of things, right? And so that's how their time and energy needs to be spent. And let me come back to a note on that. But first, productivity, that formula is about the integrator, right? It's about using time and energy and our resources to really be focused on driving productivity. Again, execution, making it real in the organization. Now let's come back to the visionary for a second on that creativity side, because a lot of times visionary brings in an integrator and their reaction is, well, now what? Now what do I do? And we talk about it as being put out to pasture. They feel like they've been put out to pasture. Mm-hmm. And the reality is they've just never had the freedom to focus their energy on creativity. Yeah. And it's essential that they do it, but it's going to feel weird for a while. And so I've had a lot of visionaries kind of go through that arc, and it takes them sometimes 3, 6, 9 months before they really start to get their head around, okay, now I get it. Now I see how this is, it for them in that role is being productive, right? Because of the creativity they're able to manifest and then bring into the organization that then the integrator and the rest of the leadership team can take and go and be productive with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So then you also mentioned attention residue, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I would love to talk about that.
So attention residue.
You see, I go down these different tangents.
I love it.
I got sucked into the website, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, no, these are all great topics. So attention residue it's what comes from switching gears too much. So multitasking, more and more, the science is saying is not real. Right. And you'll get into different great fights with people about that. But the explanation for, why sometimes it feels like you're doing it, but you're really not, is this attention residue. Because when I switch gears from task A to task B, there's a transition time. Right? It takes time, it takes energy, and there's a whole taper out of task A and a taper into task B. It's not like I'm going from 100% in one immediately over to 100% in the other. And that is very cumulative. So if I'm switching tasks 25 times in the morning or throughout the day, then I'm losing all that attention in those switches. Mm-hmm. And that's lost productivity or creativity, depending on which area your focus is. And so, one of the solutions for that is time blocking. That concept, just for those who aren't familiar with it, is blocking significant chunks of time, could be an hour, could be 4 hours, could be a day, where it's really focused in a certain type of area or on some deep work so that you can do it without getting switched. Mm-hmm. You can do it without getting interrupted. You can do it without having to switch back and forth between the little things. And that's the only way that you're ever really going to get to some of the deep, meaningful things that you need to do, particularly when you're in the role of being the visionary or the integrator. Mm-hmm. Right? Visionaries like you love to be distracted. Right? I mean, you're built for it. So squirrel comes by, you got to look. Mm-hmm. And so you have to systematically put yourself in a situation where you're protected from that stuff. If you want to let your mind go to a deeper level and think about some things that you just won't get to otherwise unless you create a space to do it.
Well, I'm a huge believer in time blocking, and I do time block, and then I have to battle myself when people want in on that time block. And then I have to just be really good about setting boundaries and saying no.
So do you have a standard time block structure for a week?
I don't have a standard. So a lot of times it's based on what's going on for the week, but somewhere I block out that time for the deeper work. And then that becomes, and honestly, it's usually the weekend because I know.
Ooh, weekends are for free time.
I know.
So, all right. So let me describe a structure for you that I use. And I pretty religiously stick to this. So Mondays, what we're doing today, this is Multiplier Monday for me. And so Mondays are reserved for me to do interactive things. So I do, podcasts, I'll do, phone calls, I'll meet new people, I'll do kinds of things like that, which is really, it's either content or relationship oriented in a way that I think will turn into more than just the interaction, right? Mm-hmm. So you and I are going to have this conversation for an hour, but there's a lot more that'll come from that because it'll go on your podcast and, whatever, right? So there's a multiplier effect.
Right.
So that's my Monday. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are dedicated to direct client time. So I spend those days working with my private clients. Nothing else happens on those days. I don't have phone calls. I don't have other projects. Nothing's coming in, right? I mean, it's just all really, really focused. So I can be at my best when I'm doing that work. And then Fridays are Freedom Friday. And so I have a whole structure of these different areas that I'm working on creating new things around the way I want, my world to look, but it's very creative oriented. And so that's all the stuff that happens on Friday. I don't have meetings on Friday. I protect that time because that has a specific purpose in my framework. And then Saturday and Sunday are free days. And everybody that I work with knows that. And so it helps me because it's easy, it's simple, it's always the same. I'm not changing it around so that I have to remember what goes where. It's just always like that. And if something won't fit there right now, it'll fit there later. And so we just push it out, and that's okay. And so sometimes it's hard, right? And people ask, but over time that has saved me. Oh, it's just saved me so much headache and heartache, and made kind of the right balance of space that I wanted for my world to kind of look like I wanted it to look.
That's on my list of things to model. Let's segue a little bit. This is a question I've been asking a lot of guests over the last couple of months. I know we're past the beginning of the year, but looking at Vistage's CEO Confidence Index for 2018, I think this was something they published in December, indicates high revenue growth and hiring. 83% of CEOs anticipate gains, while 71% plan to increase for hiring. I'd love to hear your take on that with what's going on with growth in general, and what do you think is how businesses are going to be impacted by that?
Again, you like to ask these questions that have about 14 things embedded in them. So this one, what I'll tell you is this: the folks that I'm talking to, that I'm having conversations with, generally are hiring. I mean, so there's a lot of hiring going on. There's a lot of energy going into that. There's also a lot of discipline going into smarter hiring. And so they're becoming more thoughtful about the process they use, the approach they take to make sure that they don't make stupid hiring mistakes, and that they get right people in from the jump. There's a lot more competition for people. You're seeing that show itself in the marketplace. So people are feeling wage pressure. They're feeling that kind of stuff, but it's making them then think about compensation packages and really how to get really, really clear on who they want really and how to find them, and then how to offer them a package that's going to be attractive for them to come in. So no one answer. And these really aren't new. I'm not telling you anything new.
Right.
But it's just, it's a time in the marketplace, I think, where you've got to be really good on both fronts. You got to be really good on your selection side. You got to be really good on your package side, or you're going to get stuck. You're going to get stuck with the leftover people, or you're just not going to be able to you're not going to be able to attract the talent that you want.
And then what about retention? Because that seems to be another challenge, especially with our rising workforce being so much younger, and they're going to take over 50% of the labor force. What are you seeing with retention? Yeah,
for sure. So, one of the core questions that we talk about to get the visionary and the integrator on the same page on, and it's one of the areas of the vision traction organizer in EOS is about this core focus, which is what's the big why of the organization. And where are we going to go play? But that big why, that purpose that people can really see and believe in and get behind and want to be a part of is a big thing, right? It's an important piece of the puzzle, and you sort of ignore that at your own peril. If the only purpose you can come up with is make money, not a lot of people care about you wanting to make money, right? And so, but if you want to make a dent in the universe that looks like this, and this is something that I get excited about, now you've got me. Now you've got my interest. And if I can see how I can do the things that I love, do the things that I'm great at, and fit into that and help make that happen, now we're really talking. And then you kind of go back to Dan Pink's Drive. Have you read Drive or seen his video on Drive, right?
Yeah.
So his three things there, all of a sudden, we were talking about traditional compensation a little bit ago, but if you can show me a role where I can play that fits into something that's really cool or important or something I really believe in, where I can continue to master my craft, I can have some autonomy, but I can really believe that I'm having an impact and making a difference. Now, we've sort of got the magic combination there. So, all my clients, the folks that I'm talking to that are running entrepreneurial businesses, they're all trying to solve this for themselves, answer those questions for themselves, and then, communicate that back out to the world so they can come out on top of this, the talent war, if you will.
Yeah. And I talk about this with clients when it comes to this retention piece. I think emotional intelligence is making kind of another big comeback from the 90s of how important it is to really be connected and engaged with your employees. And kind of what I preach is finding out what the motivators are to capture them and keep them. And I talk to a lot of millennials to kind of get their feedback and their thoughts, and they want that development. I had one say to me that she's felt that every job she's been in, that she had a sense of and a feeling of that they really weren't all that excited about her being there. She didn't feel like, she never felt like she fit in. And I think that's the engagement piece that's getting missed.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, if I was going to, kind of focus on one other related area here, it is that being a great leader and a great manager is essential. And, folks want to read more on that. I'd point you to a book called How to Be a Great Boss, written by my co-author for Rocket Fuel, Gino Wickman, and another good friend named Renee Boer, Boer, and How to Be a Great Boss. And it really lays out the key ingredients of being a great boss, how to really be a great leader for your people, how to be a great manager for your people. And, to kind of tie this in with the stuff we've already been talking about, when I look at myself, I'm not a great manager. Okay. Can I do it? Yeah. It requires more energy, but there are people that I see every week that are so much better managers than I am. And your people deserve great managers. If you're going to put somebody in a role that's going to have a team, man, make sure that person is a great manager. Make sure that they're wired for that and they are on fire for it, because your people are going to get so much more from it. And that's how you're going to keep them. That's how they're going to want to be there. That's how they're going to be their best. And, I did a video a while back. I think I called it Visionary confessions. and that's one of my confessions is, I can handle about 1 or 2 direct reports effectively without really, either putting myself into the red line or doing a disservice to my folks. If you ask me to manage 7 people, I'm not going to do it very well. But there are people who, they can fall out of bed and they're great at that. Right. And so let's have them be in their roles. Give me one person to manage and let them manage the rest of them.
I want to manage the person. I like to manage the person who's going to manage all the other people.
There you go. That's it.
And I definitely have a vision for how everybody needs to be managed, which is really about finding their motivation and keeping them engaged.
Yep. I agree 100%.
Speaking of books, and we're getting ready to wrap up, I like to ask everybody, you've named a few books, I've jotted those down. Are there any books to you that, are really powerful books that are important to you in your own development?
I just read or, as you say, listened to a book on a long drive to and from Colorado. So I had plenty of time in the car, and this is a really kind of a long book, but it's really good. It was given to me by a client, and it's called Principles by Ray Dalio.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard this one?
Yeah, I have that one queued up in Audible.
Yeah, I definitely listen to it, and you can turn the speed up on that one, Gina. It'll be okay. You can go to 2.0 on that one, and be fine. But no, it was really good and far ranging, but a lot of structure there that you can kind of pick and choose things that seem like a fit for your world, your personal world and your business world. So that's one I would recommend off the top.
Okay. Any podcasts that you listen to? I
listen to a lot of podcasts. So let's see. Actually, let me pull my thing here and I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So
favorites?
There is my son, one of my sons, who is kind of a history buff. He's gotten me into Dan Carlin. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dan. He has 2 that are really good. This guy is considered probably one of the greatest living historians of our time. And so he'll go into these different topics, and he'll kind of go in current day, the political scene, but then he'll also take it back to, ancient history and kind of bounce around. So he has one called, thing's not pulling up very fast. Let me think about this. One is called Hardcore History, and the other one is called, it's not connecting.
That's okay.
Oh, Common Sense. That's the other one.
Okay.
Who else do I listen to that you would like? Joe Rogan.
Mm-hmm.
You listen to his?
Yep.
Mixergy is a good one.
What's it called?
Mixergy. Mixergy.
Okay.
He talks to a lot of startups and kind of people who have turned the corner and taken their company from a startup to something, pretty significant.
Oh, cool.
And so his is good as well.
And anywhere else that you go to get support for yourself to continue to be successful? So
Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach, you know him?
Yes.
Or of him. So he's my coach. And so I'm a part of that program and have been for quite a while now. And so that's probably the number one place that I would throw out that I go for support.
And how often do you go to Chicago for that?
Once a quarter.
Yeah.
Well, at least once a quarter. So actually, sometimes I'll go up for extra ones and whatever. But it's kind of interesting. We think about, and we've talked about this a lot, Gino and I and Dan. But EOS is kind of the operating system for your business. We think of Strategic Coach as kind of the operating system for the entrepreneur.
Oh, interesting.
So through that program and the thinking tools that Dan's put together, it really helps you as the entrepreneur to get clear on what you need to get clear on.
His office isn't too far away from where my mom lives.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I'm from Chicago originally, but I have a lot of friends who are part of that program. So I when they're in town and I'm in town, I try to connect with people when they're there.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. I was actually just up there last week.
Oh, great. Well, maybe next time we'll either meet there or we'll meet somewhere in Dallas.
Somewhere where you're throwing a party.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, it has been so great having you on this podcast today. I know you're busy and I really appreciate your time to do this with me today.
Oh, my pleasure, Gina. Thanks for having me on.
Sure. And if people want to connect with you, learn more about you, your business, your company, what are the best ways for them to do that?
First place to go is markcwinters.com.
Okay.
And pretty much Mark C. Winters on any of the socials will get you to me. And the other website to check out is rocketfuelnow.com.
We will put that in the show notes so that people can connect with you more and learn from you more. And we're going to wrap up the show. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You've been listening to The Pivotal Leader with Gina Trimarco, owner and founder of Pivot 10 Results and Carolina Improv Company. You can find show notes for this episode on our website at thepivotalleader.com. The Pivotal Leader is a production of Pivot 10 Results, a strategy and training company that helps businesses shift from people problems to performance results. If your company needs help pivoting to success, visit pivot10results.com or email Gina at pivot10results.com. And until next time, if you're feeling stuck in your business, it's probably time to pivot.